The village beauty lost everything because of jealousy. She was the most beautiful girl in the entire village of Okechi, and that was the very thing that destroyed her life. If you are new here, welcome. And if you have been watching for a while, you already know that this channel does not waste your time with boring stories. Subscribe now, because what you are about to hear is the kind of story that will stay with you long after it ends. Now, let us go. Her name was Adaeze, and from the moment she was born, people could not stop talking about her. Her mother, Ngozi, used to say that when Adaeze came out crying in the early morning hours, even the midwife paused and stared. That is the kind of child she was. Not just beautiful in the ordinary sense, but the kind of beautiful that made the world go quiet around her. She had skin the color of fresh palm oil in sunlight, eyes that held the depth of a still river, and a smile so warm it could melt even the oldest, hardest hearts in Okechi. She grew up knowing she was beautiful. How could she not? Every market day, traders gave her extra fruit. The men who sat under the mango tree near the well stopped their argument when she passed. Old women touched her cheeks with trembling hands and said things like, "God spent extra time on this one." Even Chief Obiefune, a man who had never complimented anything in his life, once told Adaeze's father, Emeka, that his daughter was a gift the gods had wrapped in human skin. But here is the thing about beauty in a village like Okechi. It is never just yours. It belongs to everybody, whether you like it or not. And where beauty is on display, envy follows like a shadow. Adaeze's best friend since childhood was a girl named Nneka. They had grown up side by side, played in the same red dust, fetched water from the same stream, shared yam from the same pot. Nneka was not ugly. She was pleasant looking with a round, kind face and thick arms that were strong from years of farm work. People in the village called her the reliable one. She was the girl you went to when you needed help. She was the girl who showed up when nobody else did. She cooked the best bitter leaf soup in 3 villages, and her laughter was the kind that lit up a room from corner to corner. But next to Adaeze, nobody saw any of that. The first time Nneka felt it, that slow, cold creep of something ugly inside her chest, was she was 17. A young man named Tobena had been visiting their compound for weeks. He was from a good family in the next village, educated, tall, with a face that made girls forget their own names. Everyone in Okechi whispered that he was looking for a wife. Nneka had watched him from the corner of her eye, had noticed that he always sat where he could see her when she swept the compound. She had started getting up earlier, washing her face more carefully, wearing her best wrapper. She had truly convinced herself that Tobena was coming for her. But that one Tuesday morning, he came with palm wine and kola nut. He came for Adaeze. Nneka smiled. She stood there and smiled and said all the right things and helped prepare the food and laughed at the right moments. But that night, alone in her room, she pressed her face into her mat and felt something break open inside her that she would spend years trying to pretend was not there. Adaeze did not choose Tobena. She told her father she was not ready for marriage yet. She wanted to finish learning how to weave. She wanted to travel to the big market in Aba first. She was not the kind of girl who rushed into anything. And so Tobena eventually went away, and that chapter closed. But the feeling in Nneka's chest did not go away with him. It had found a home there. It was comfortable. The years moved. Adaeze blossomed in ways that seemed almost unfair. Her weaving became the talk of the region. She produced cloth so fine and so perfectly patterned that merchants from 3 towns away made special trips to buy from her. She started her own small business selling at the Eke market, and within 2 seasons, she was earning more than most men in the village. She built a small extension to her father's compound. She bought herself 2 goats. She paid for her younger brother Chidubem's school fees without being asked. And she remained unmarried, not because no one wanted her, but because she had standards that went beyond beauty. She wanted a man of character. She said that often.
I have seen too many beautiful women cry behind closed doors. Beauty does not protect you from a bad man, it just attracts more of them. People admired her for that. Young girls followed her in the market just to hear her talk. Then, Chibuike arrived in Okechi, and everything changed. He came from Enugu, transferred to the local government office to oversee a new road construction project. He was 32, well-dressed, serious-faced, but with a warmth underneath that he did not show to everyone. He rented a room near the market, and within 2 seasons, he was earning more than most men in the village.
Weak, the entire village knew his name. He was the kind of man who carried himself like he had never once doubted who he was. Not arrogant, just settled, complete. Adaize met him at the Eke market on a Wednesday. She was setting up her weaving display when she dropped a roll of cloth that tumbled under his feet. He picked it up. Their eyes met. He said something that made her laugh. She said something back that made him stop walking and stay for another hour. Within a month, Chibuike was visiting the compound with kola nuts. This time, Adaize said yes. The compound filled with a joy that had not been there in years. Emeka, Adaize's father, wept quietly in the corner and called it the happiest day of his life. Ngozi, her mother, immediately began planning. The women of the village came with gifts of cloth and oil and pepper. Everyone celebrated. Everyone. Except Ineka. Ineka sat at the back of the compound during the first visit, her wrapper too tight around her shoulders, her smile pulled like a curtain across a dark window. She had met Chibuike 3 days before Adaize had. He had asked her for directions to the market. They had talked for a few minutes. She had felt something, that particular electricity that you feel when a conversation is going somewhere. And then Adaize had appeared at the market the next day, and that was the end of that story before it even began. Ineka smiled at Adaize when the announcement was made. She hugged her. She said all the right things. She even cried what looked like happy tears. But that night, she could not sleep. She lay on her mat and stared at the ceiling until the mosquitoes gave up on her. She thought about everything. Her father who died young, her mother who worked herself thin on the farm, the men who had come and gone from her life without stain, the market store that earned just enough, the way people said, and then there is Ineka, always second, always next, always the reliable background to someone else's main story. And Adaize had everything. Adaize had always had everything. Beauty, money, respect, a good family, and now the most eligible man to set foot in Okechi in 10 years. Something snapped quietly in Ineka that night. Not loudly. There was no dramatic moment. Just a small, almost imperceptible shift, like the first crack in a clay pot. You cannot even see it yet, but the water will come through eventually. It always does. She started small. A word here, a whisper there, the kind of thing you can always say you did not mean. At the women's meeting in the church hall, she leaned close to Mama Chinyere and said, almost as an aside, I wonder what Chibuike thinks about Adaize's temper. You know how she can be. Mama Chinyere's eyes sharpened. What temper? Ineka waved it away. No, nothing. I should not have said that. You know I love Adaize. Never mind. Mama Chinyere told 3 people before morning. Ineka told another woman that she had once seen Adaize speaking with a man at a distant market, a man who was not Chibuike, and that they seemed very close. She said it quietly with a frown of concern, like a person worried for a friend. I'm sure it was nothing. You know how people can be. I just hope Chibuike does not hear about it. These things can be misunderstood. By the time that story traveled through Okechi, it had grown 4 legs and a tail. Adaize started noticing small things, a coolness in the way Mama Chinyere greeted her, a strange look from one of the women at the well, whispers that stopped when she entered the compound. She asked Chibuike once if anyone had said anything to him. He told her no, that she was imagining things, and she almost believed him. But she did not stop feeling it, that low hum of something wrong, like when the air before a storm changes, but the sky is still clear. And through all of it, Ineka was right there, at her side, bringing her food when she was tired, helping her prepare for market days, listening patiently when Adaize talked about her plans for the wedding, being the best friend she had always been on the surface.
Now pause here for just a moment because this is where the story becomes something else entirely. What Ineka did next, nobody in Okechi could have predicted. And if you want to know what really destroyed Adaize, stay with me. Subscribe first if you haven't already because stories like this don't come every day. Now back to Okechi. Ineka went to see Mama Ifeoma. If you know anything about a village like Okechi, you know that every village has one. An older woman, half herbalist, half oracle, living at the edge of the settlement where the forest begins to press against the farmland. Not a witch, people in the village were careful about that word, but not entirely ordinary either. Mama Ifeoma knew things, she made things, and people went to her when they wanted something they could not get through ordinary means. Ineka went on a Thursday, just before dusk, when the paths were empty. We don't know exactly what she asked for. What was found out later, much later, after everything had unraveled, was that Ineka paid for something, a charm, something meant to
Cause confusion between two people, to make trust erode, to plant doubt where there was certainty. Mama Ifeoma, in the account she gave afterward to the elders, said that Nneka had been shaking when she came. Not the shaking of cold, the shaking of someone who knows they are crossing a line they cannot uncross. She had paid with her best wrapper and a small amount of money and the feathers of a black bird. She had taken what she came for and walked back into the village without looking behind her. What happened next was slow and terrible in the way of most truly terrible things. Chibuike started having dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but disturbing ones. He would see Adaize's face in the dreams, but it would shift, become someone else, become something cold. He woke up not frightened, but unsettled, like a fine piece of cloth that has been rubbed against itself until the threads begin to separate. He could not explain it. He started to withdraw slightly, small distances, not coming on certain evenings, being a little quieter than usual, looking at Adaize sometimes with an expression she could not read. Adaize felt it like a knife turning. She asked him what was wrong. He said nothing. She asked again. He said he was tired from work. She asked a third time, and he said, "I keep hearing things, Adaize, from different people. Things that confuse me." She asked what things. He could not give her a straight answer because the stories themselves were too scattered, too strange, too layered with half-truths to hold in his hands. Someone had told her she was wild before he came. Someone else mentioned the man at the distant market. Someone said her business money came from a source her family did not speak about openly. None of it was true, but all of it had the exact shape of truth. Sourced in real facts, twisted at the last second, wrapped in the concerned voices of people who seemed to care. Adaize wept alone. She did not know where the stories were coming from. She thought of everyone who might want to hurt her and could not land on any name that felt right. The one person she never suspected was the one sitting beside her, holding her hand, saying, "These people are wicked, Adaize. Do not let them get to you. Chibuike will come back to his senses." Her mother, Ngozi, saw what was happening and begged Emeka to intervene. Emeka went to Chibuike's family. There were meetings, there were long conversations under the mango trees. But by then, the rot had set in deeply, and you cannot talk a man back to certainty once confusion has made a home in his mind. Chibuike pulled away, not all at once, but progressively, like the tide going out. He stopped visiting. He sent a message that he needed time. A month passed, then 2. Then on a quiet morning in the 8th month after the kola nuts had been brought and the joy had filled the compound, Chibuike's family sent word that he had been transferred back to Enugu. He was gone. The compound fell into a grief so heavy it had weight. Adaize's mother, Ngozi,
did not leave her room for 3 days. Adaeze herself went about her daily work with the silence of someone who has been hit so hard that even the sound of it has not arrived yet. She wove, she went to the market, she fed the goats, she braided her hair. She did all of it like a woman moving through deep water where every step cost something enormous. Nneka came every day. She brought soup, she sat beside her. She said, "I am here. I am always here." And Adaeze, broken and alone, held her hand and said, "At least I have you." The thing about poison is that it is patient. It does not need to hurry. It simply waits for you to ingest it all before it shows you what it was. It was a market woman named Bisi who broke everything open. Bisi was from the neighboring village, a loud, no-nonsense trader who had been buying Adaeze's woven cloth for 3 years. She had a tongue that moved faster than her brain could stop it. But she had a heart that was fundamentally straight. She did not believe in letting wrong things sit in silence. She came to the market one morning and pulled Adaeze aside with a grip that left marks. "You are going to hear what I am about to say, because somebody needs to tell you, and it is clear your own people will not." What Bisi had heard, she had heard from a woman in her village, who had heard it from a woman in Okechi, who had, after too much palm wine at a burial feast, told the truth about where the stories about Adaeze had started. They had all started with Nneka. Adaeze stood in the middle of the market with her cloth folded in her arms and felt the world tilt sideways. She did not speak for a long time. She heard Bisi still talking, the woman at the well, the stories about Chibuike, Mama Ifelma, and each word landed like a stone dropped from a height, sinking into water, disturbing something deep down. She went home and sat in her room and did not move until night fell. She thought about it all. Every visit from Nneka after Chibuike pulled away, every sympathetic word, every bowl of soup, every hand held in the darkness, everything they had ever shared with each other, every fear she had voiced, every private thought she had handed to Nneka like a gift. And she saw clearly now how all of those things had been used, quietly, carefully, by someone who had never once stopped smiling. The grief became something else, something hotter.
She did not go to Nneka, not that night. She spent the next 2 days talking to people. She went first to the woman at the well, a quiet, careful woman who had first denied everything and then, under the weight of Adaeze's direct and silent gaze, told her the truth. Yes, Nneka had said things, several times, about several people. She had been very careful about how she said them, always framed as concern, always wrapped in love, but the meaning was never in doubt. Then, Adaeze went to someone in the village who had once visited Mama Ifeoma for a different matter entirely and knew exactly what kinds of things the woman at the edge of the forest trafficked in. By the time she was finished talking to people, she had a picture so complete it made her feel sick. The confrontation happened on a Thursday evening in Nneka's own compound. Adaeze walked in and sat down. Nneka looked up from her cooking fire with a smile that crinkled her eyes at the corners. "Ada, I was just about to come and see you." Adaeze said nothing for a moment. She just looked at her. The way you look at something once familiar that you are now seeing for the first time. Then she said, quietly, "Tell me about Mama Ifeoma." The smile did not disappear. It transformed. It went from warm to careful, like a flame behind glass. Nneka said, "What about Mama Ifeoma?" "You went to her. You paid her. You wanted to destroy what I was building with Chibuike." "Ada, where are you hearing these things? Who is putting this nonsense in your..." Before you finish that sentence, Adaeze said, still in that same quiet voice, I am asking why. The fire crackled between them. A goat wandered past. Somewhere in the compound next door, a child was singing. Neka was quiet for so long that the silence became its own kind of answer. And then she spoke. And what she said was the most unexpected thing, because it was not denial, it was not deflection. What came out of Neka once the silence broke was raw and ragged and honest in the way that only something that has been locked up for too long can be. She wept. She said, I have loved you since we were children, Adaeze, like a sister, like the sister I never had. And every single day of my life, I have stood next to you and watched the world see only you. Every man, every woman, every trader, every visitor, they all see only you. I have spent my whole life being invisible beside you, and I truly tried to be happy for you. But when Chibuike came, and I had felt something with him first, just for a moment, just for that one small moment, and then you walked through the market and he forgot I existed, something happened inside me that I could not control. Adaeze said nothing. Nneka pressed her hands to her face. I know what I did was wrong. I knew it when I was doing it. But I was so angry, Adaeze. I was so full of something that I could not name. I just wanted the world to see that you are not perfect, that you could fall too, that I was not always second to you. The night had fully settled now. The stars over Okechi were very bright. Adaeze looked at her best friend, the girl she had played with in the dust, the woman who had sat beside her through every hardship, the person who had been destroying her life with both hands and smiling while she did it, and she felt something that surprised even herself. She felt pity. Not forgiveness, not yet, but pity, the kind that hurts more than anger, because it means you completely understand. She said, You were never second to me. I never saw it that way, not once. You were always my equal, my other half. But you could not believe that, and so you turned it into something that poisoned both of us. She stood up. She looked at Nneka for a moment long. Then she walked out of the compound without looking back. The story did not end there. Stories like this never end at the confrontation. The confrontation is just the beginning of the aftermath, which is where the real consequences live. Word moved through Okechi the way word always moves through a small village, fast, complete, and unstoppable. By the following market day, everyone knew. Nneka's visits to Mama Ifeoma, the whispering campaign, the constructed stories about Adaeze, all of it. The village did not take it quietly. A gathering of elders was called. Nneka was brought before them and could not deny what too many people now knew to be true. Mama Ifeoma was also called. She was old and did not fear much, and she confirmed what had been brought to her and what she had given. She was rebuked publicly and warned. Her standing in the village shifted permanently.
Nneka was not banished. Okechi was not that kind of village. But something was done to her that was in many ways more difficult than banishment. She was left alone. The women who had been her friends grew distant. The people who had once come to her for help, for soup, for her laughter, they stopped coming. The village did not punish her dramatically. It simply withdrew, the way people do when they have seen something true about someone that they cannot unsee. Nneka moved to her aunt's compound at the edge of the village. She became quieter than she had ever been. She started spending mornings at the stream alone before anyone else arrived. She sat with herself in ways she had never had to before. And Adaeze rebuilt. It was not fast, and it was not easy. And there were mornings when she woke up and the grief of what Chibuke's absence meant was so heavy she could not rise from her mat until the sun had climbed halfway up the sky. But she rose. She always rose. Her weaving business expanded. She took on 2 apprentices. young girls from the village who had not had the chance to learn a trade. She taught them everything she knew about pattern and thread and patience. She became something in Okechi that had nothing to do with beauty and everything to do with character. And then, 6 months after the confrontation with Nneka, something arrived in the village that nobody had expected: a letter. It came through the local government office, addressed to Adaize, written in Chibuke's careful hand. He had heard from a colleague who had been posted back to the area about what had actually happened, about the whispering campaign, about Mama Ifeoma, about the truth behind all the stories that had poisoned his mind and driven him away. The letter was 3 pages long. It said that he was ashamed, that he should have trusted her, that he had let confusion live where certainty should have stood, and that he had been carrying the weight of his own failure to believe in her since he left. He did not ask for anything in the letter. He simply told the truth of how he felt, that he had loved her, that he still did, and that she deserved to know that what happened was not her fault and never had been. Adaize read the letter sitting under the mango tree in her father's compound. Her mother sat beside her and did not speak. Mecca stood a little way off, his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the sky. When she finished reading, she folded the letter and held it in her lap for a long time. She did not send a reply that day or the next. She took 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, she finished a weaving commission that was outstanding. She attended a naming ceremony for a neighbor's new child. She walked to the stream each morning and watched the water. She ate properly. She slept well. She let herself arrive at whatever she was going to feel without rushing it. When she finally wrote back, the letter was 1 page. It said, "I am not angry. I understand what happened and why. I also need you to know that I am not the same woman you left. She is gone. I have become someone different, someone I like better. If you want to know this woman, you are welcome to come and find out. If not, I wish you well with everything I have." Chibuke arrived in Okechi 43 days later. He arrived simply, without ceremony, without announcement, with only a small bag and a quiet face. He went first to Emeka's compound and sat with her father for 2 hours before he asked to see Adaize. The conversation between him and Emeka was not recorded, but people who had seen Emeka afterward said he came out looking like a man who had been thorough and was satisfied. Adaize met Chibuke at the edge of the compound. They talked for the rest of the afternoon. They talked as the light went gold, and then orange, and then faded. They talked as the night insects began their chorus. They talked until Adaize's mother called her inside, and even then they stood at the threshold and continued. Nothing was resolved that evening. Nothing was promised, but something was re-established, something honest and careful, like a building that is being constructed by people who know exactly which walls had collapsed last time and are determined to lay a different kind of foundation. Now here is the part that most people in Okechi did not know, because it happened quietly, away from the eyes of the village, and it is perhaps the most important part. 3 months after Chibuke came back, Adaize went to find Nneka. Not because she had forgiven her entirely, not because she had forgotten, but because she had been sitting with a question that would not leave her alone, and she needed to put it down somewhere. She found Nneka at the edge of the stream, early in the morning, before the other women came. Nneka looked up, and her face did something complicated. Guilt and relief and grief all moving across it at once. Adaize sat beside her on the bank. They both watched the water. After a while, Adaize said, "I need you to understand something, Nneka. Not for my sake, for yours."
Nneka did not speak. "You were never in my shadow," Adaize said. "That was never the truth of us, but you believed it so completely that you made it true. You spent so many years looking at what I had instead of looking at what you had, and that looking cost you everything. Not because of me, because of what the looking did to you inside." Nneka's hands were trembling in her lap. You are the one people trusted, Adaise said. You are the one they came to when they were in trouble. That is not a small thing, Neka. That is not second place. But you never saw it. You are too busy watching me. A long silence. The stream ran over its stones. Then, Neka said, in a voice so small it was barely there, I am sorry, Ada. I know, Adaise said, but say it to yourself, not to me. I am not the one you broke. She stood, dusted her wrapper, and walked back toward the village. That was the last time they spoke for a long while. But people said that after that morning, Neka began to change, slowly. The way things that have been broken change, which is never back to what they were, but sometimes into something different that has its own kind of worth. She started going back to church, not for appearances, for something else, something interior. She picked up her cooking again, began supplying food to the new school that had opened at the edge of Okechi. The children loved her food. Word spread. Within a year, she had a small contract, then another. The village did not warm to her overnight, but it moved toward her, one small step at a time, because what she was offering now was genuine in a way it had always been before everything got tangled up in jealousy. She never married. That was the price. Not officially, not as a punishment, just as the consequence of the kind of woman she had become in the years when she was destroying other people's lives instead of building her own. The men who might have come did not come, and Neka learned to make peace with a solitude that had once felt like exile, but eventually came to feel like company. Adaise and Chibuike did not have a large wedding. They had a small one, with immediate family and a handful of people from the village. Emeka slaughtered a goat. Ngozi wore her best wrapper. The ceremony was held under the same mango tree where Adaise had read the letter. People from the village said it was the most peaceful celebration they had attended in years, not because it was elaborate, but because everyone in it arrived honestly. In the years that followed, Adaise's weaving business grew into something that employed 12 women from 3 villages. She opened a small shop in the town market. Her apprentices went on to train others. She and Chibuike had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, and the compound her father had built filled with the kind of noise that means a family is alive and present and not pretending to be anything it is not. She never became a different kind of woman after what happened. She did not become harder or colder or more suspicious. If anything, she became more deliberate. She took longer to trust, not because she was afraid, but because she had learned the difference between presence and loyalty, and she no longer confused the two. There was one evening, years later, when one of her apprentices, a young girl named Chisom, came to her crying over a friend she suspected had been telling lies about her. Adaise sat the girl down and made her tea and let her talk until she ran out of words. Then she said, "Jealousy does not know it is jealousy. It disguises itself as love, as closeness, as concern. And sometimes the people who want to destroy you are the ones holding your hand when they do it. Pay attention not to what people say. Pay attention to what the world around you does when they are near." Chisom wiped her eyes and asked, "How do you know when someone is truly your friend?" Adaise was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "A true friend is someone who does not need you to fail in order to feel like they are succeeding. That is the only test that matters." She told Chisom one more thing before the girl went home. She said, "And do not become so consumed by what was done to you that you forget to build your own life. That is the second trap. That is how you let what hurts you also steal your future." The people of Okechi told the story of Adaise and Neka for years after that. Not because it was the most dramatic story the village had ever produced. It was not. But because it contained something true that people recognized, the way you recognize your own face in still water. The truth that beauty is not what makes you a target, proximity is. The people closest to you are the ones who can see most clearly what you have, and the ones most capable of resenting it, if they have never made peace with their own story. Nneka lived into old age. She never fully returned to the center of village life, but she found a different kind of belonging at the edges of it. The school children who ate her food grew up and became people with their own families, and they did not forget who fed them. That was her legacy in the end. Not what she had tried to take, but what she had given once she stopped trying to take. There was a morning very close to the end of Nneka's life when Adaeze came to her house with a pot of soup. She did not explain why, she did not announce it. She just set the pot down and sat with her for an hour. They were both old women by then. They sat in the silence the way old people do when words have long since run out of new things to say.
When Adaeze was leaving, Nneka said, "I wasted so much time." Adaeze turned in the doorway. She looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "You stopped wasting it. That is what counts." And she walked home through the morning light of Okechi, through the red dust and the sound of children and the smell of firewood and the shouts of market women warming up for the day. She walked home to the life she had built, not the one that had been planned for her, not the one that jealousy had tried to dismantle, but the one she had put back together with her own hands, one careful day at a time. Jealousy told Nneka that Adaeze had everything and she had nothing, but jealousy was a liar. Nneka had everything she needed to build a beautiful life. She just could not see it through the shadow she had chosen to stand in. The village beauty did not lose everything because of her beauty. She almost lost everything because of someone else's inability to celebrate what they already had. And that is the story that every village in the world knows, even if they tell it under different trees and call the women by different names. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something true, then subscribe before you go, because every week this channel brings you stories from the roots, real, raw, and deeply human, the kind of stories that do not let you go easily. Click the subscribe button, ring the bell, and come back next time, because the next story is already waiting for you, and it is even heavier than this one. Stay wise, stay watchful, and never let someone else's shadow make you forget your own light.